Hello YouTubers out there, this is Jerry Saravia at the movies. So today we're talking about a somewhat somber subject, but I think it needs to be addressed. And that is that Alec Baldwin was involved in the death of a cinematographer. He shot her with a prop gun. This was on the set of a film called Rust, which was being filmed in New Mexico. Let's backtrack just a little. No charges have been filed. The cinematographer was named, don't know if I'm pronouncing it correctly, Helena Hutchins, and the prop gun misfire also wounded the director, Joel Souza. This was a film that I believe Alec Baldwin was co-producing, and again it's called Rust, which is an independent feature, and was being filmed at the Bonanza Creek Ranch, south of Santa Fe. Hutchins was transported by helicopter to University of New Mexico Hospital in Albuquerque, and she died. She was 48 years old. And Sousa, she was 42. Sousa was 48 years old, taken by ambulance. He received emergency treatment for his injuries, and apparently, I guess he's stable. Now, the firearm was discharged by Alec Baldwin. So far, it hasn't exactly been ruled as an accident just yet. It's still an ongoing investigation. And this brings up all sorts of questions. Now, from what I understand, prop guns can usually cause some sort of problem, to say the least. They're supposed to use blanks. The blanks could cause some damage. The explosion of gunpowder and hot gas from a prop gun apparently can seriously injure someone, which I wouldn't be surprised, of course, if the person is too close to the shooter. This is based on these words are from Dave Brown in a 2019 article in the American Cinematographer. Usually when this situation, which is very rare, is brought up, the first major incident that we all know of is the unfortunate passing of Brandon Lee back in 1993. The prop gun accident in which he was killed due to the tip of a dummy bullet accidentally ending up lodged in the gun. And the gun was fired at Brandon Lee, who ended up getting wounded in the abdomen and thus died from this as well. There was another incident in 1984 for actor John Eric Huxham, who was killed on the set of the TV series Cover Up. Apparently, he accidentally shot himself in the head with a gun loaded with blanks. The gun was real, but the bullets were blanks. So during the delay in filming, and I'm reading this here, Huxham fooled around with his gun. He took out all but one round and spun the cartridge as if he were playing Russian roulette, placed the gun to his temple and fired. The impact of the paper wadding used to seal the cartridge pushed a piece of his skull into his brain, causing massive hemorrhaging, and he died 6 days later. Now, apparently this type of thing did happen even prior to that. The General, directed by Buster Keaton in 1926, this was a situation where an assistant director, Harry Barnes, was shot in the face with a blank round during the filming of Keaton's comedy. And fortunately, he was not in close range and he wasn't badly injured, but during the same shoot, Keaton was knocked unconscious by a prop cannon that fired while he was standing close by. So that wasn't really a tragedy, but nonetheless, these accidents have happened. The other situation was The Captive, directed by Cecil B. DeMille, 1915. An extra named Charles Chandler was shot in the head and killed by a rifle that was supposed to be reloaded with blanks, but mistakenly contained a live round, not unlike the situation with Brandon Lee. And the tragic mix-up happened during a scene where soldiers are shown shooting at a door, during which time DeMille had used live rounds, or had them use live rounds. I don't know why. This type of thing did happen a lot in other productions after 1915. And in the following scene, when the door gets broken down, they were supposed to switch to blanks. Now, with a little more emphasis on the situation, there was an interview I read here with Dave Brown, who is a firearms safety specialist. And this interview was from back in 2014. So with regards to Brandon Lee and that tragedy, this is what he had to say. He said that the production for the Crow, needed some dummy cartridges for a close-up shot of loading a revolver. Not knowing any better, they purchased real cartridges from a local gun store, pried off the bullets, dumped out the gunpowder, and stuck the bullets back into the cases. Now, any firearms expert would be able to tell you that this is highly dangerous because, of course, the primers were still live. But unfortunately, they were running out of time and money at this point and had already sent their only firearms expert home early to save a few dollars. So while filming the close-ups, the actor they brought in for the scene was supposed to be supervised, but the props assistant in charge of the firearm was busy doing other props work and left the actor on their own. Some witnesses reported then that they saw the background performer pull the trigger while the dummy cartridges were still loaded in the chambers. So, he goes on to say that what people may not know is that if the primer is still live, when you pull the trigger, there is no sound, but the spark from the primer can expel a bullet an inch or two forward even with no gunpowder in the case. So at the end of the day, the props assistant emptied out the cartridges and put the gun away. He knew nothing about cleaning the gun, let alone checking the barrel for obstructions. This same revolver was apparently loaded with blanks used to fire at Brandon Lee. But again, the props assistant handling the gun had no clue how to check it for safety and simply loaded it with blanks. Since there was no firearms expert on set to instruct the actor how to cheat the angle to the side so that it doesn't get pointed directly at the actor when fired. The blank has twice as much the amount of gunpowder as a real cartridge, which I find very interesting. And when that bullet was still lodged in the barrel from 2 weeks previous, the blank propelled the bullet out the barrel with the same explosive charge as a real cartridge. And the bullet struck Brandon Lee, and we know the rest of the story. Now, apparently, there was some further information here about the Alec Baldwin situation. And this has to do with the fact that the cinematographer Helena Hutchins was huddled around the monitor lining up her next camera shot when she was accidentally killed by the prop gun. The actor was preparing to film a scene in which he pulls the gun out of his holster, and this is according to a source close to the production. The crew members had already shouted "cold gun" on the set, which is usually a way of saying that this is a safe gun. And the filmmaking team was lining up its camera angles and blah blah blah. Baldwin removed the gun from the holster once without incident, but the second time he repeated the action, ammunition flew towards the trio around the monitor. So that included also the movie's director, Joel Souza. So it penetrated Hutchins near her shoulder, then continued through to Souza, and Hutchins immediately fell to the ground, and she was bleeding. The situation is that the Associated Press reported that Baldwin was handed a loaded weapon by an assistant director who indicated it was safe to use in the moments before the actor fired it, according to the court records. The assistant director did not know the prop gun was loaded with live rounds. So again, this is just history repeating itself all over again. The interesting thing about this story, which is through the Los Angeles Times, is that the camera operators and their assistants were frustrated by the working conditions surrounding this low-budget film, Rust, including complaints about long hours, long commutes, and collecting their paychecks, and so on and so forth. And the safety protocols that were standard in the industry, including gun inspections, were not strictly followed on the Rust set near Santa Fe. So again, history repeating itself. They said at least one of the camera operators complained last weekend to a production manager about gun safety on the set. This kind of thing really shouldn't be happening. And it has happened, and now really the best thing that I think they can do is to make sure that in any situation where a gun is being fired, maybe it's better not to even use blanks. Maybe find some other way to have it spark a simulation of a gun ejecting a bullet as opposed to ejecting anything at all. But those are just my 2 cents. I feel bad for the family around this cinematographer who unfortunately died, and especially bad for Alec Baldwin because, of course, he just had no idea. But it's interesting that there were on-set gun safety issues and misfires days before this had happened. So this is, again, history repeating itself. You have to have a gun safety expert or a firearms expert checking, rechecking, triple checking, quadruple checking these guns. You don't want to have fatalities. You don't want to have people wounded. It's just not necessary. But in particular, this is kind of a first in that it's a cinematographer who was shot at and the director. This is unusual. But if you look at a lot of films, particularly where they fire guns, sometimes they have these close-up shots where it looks like, whether it's Jack Nicholson in The Departed, where he seems to be firing his gun at the lens and firing at us, so to speak, and that type of thing. Then I imagine sometimes the director and cinematographer must be nearby where these blanks are being discharged. So there's always a safety issue, but these things really should be checked very thoroughly, because otherwise don't do it at all. It's really not worth it. Not for a movie. Definitely not worth it. So those were some interesting tidbits regarding Alec Baldwin and firearms. These, again, it's just we didn't need yet another tragedy like this. It recalls too much of what happened to Brandon Lee, and that was certainly a true tragedy. I'm sure everyone agrees with that, and so is this. So those are my thoughts and a little bit of history there regarding these type of situations. And this is Jerry Saravia at the Movies, signing off.